Okay, we finished up the last video just going over the basics of photosynthesis and how the substrates get into the leaf and into the mesophyll and into the chloroplast to actually allow photosynthesis to occur. Now, the biggest question is, why the heck is regulation of the substrates in photosynthesis important? Because one substrate can definitely impact another. For example, getting CO2 into the leaf. CO2, carbon dioxide, goes in as a gas. It goes in through the stomata. However, whenever you open the stomata to get CO2 in, you also let water out. So just trying to get carbon dioxide into the leaf is going to impact one of the other substrates. Now, not only does water go out because of the CO2, think about the light. When you have light hitting the leaf, that's great, you do need light. But if you have too much light, a few things happen. Number one, the leaf heats up. Now, this is not good for the leaf if it gets too far. When it heats up, the liquid water that is coming up from the root system will then start to evaporate and turn into a gas, which is fine in small amounts. But if you've got huge amounts and the stomata are open, letting CO2 out, then you're going to have huge amounts of water exiting the leaf, which means the leaf is losing an awful lot of water. Now, this is not a problem if there is lots and lots of water. However, if you're in a water-poor environment, then this is definitely a problem. This is why we don't have plants that all look exactly the same with exactly the same adaptations. They have adaptations that suit and change and regulate the intake of CO2, the intake of light, because ultimately that will impact water. And they'll also regulate water as well, because while you do want to conserve water, water itself is a very important molecule because it helps regulate things like the temperature. Okay, so let's go and have a look at these in a bit more detail. So the reason why regulation is important is because we have optimal ranges, not just temperature like I've said here. Temperature and, in this case, water balance. We have optimal ranges where the cells actually work really well. They have enough water for all the chemical reactions. They have a high enough temperature so their reactions go fast enough, because temperature affects reaction rate. Okay, and so does water. And you have to have them properly balanced if you want to have a fast reaction rate and enough water for everything to work. However, if you go outside of those ranges, if you have too much water or too little water, too much temp or too little temp, you'll actually negatively affect the cell's functions because they won't work as well. Even too much water is a bad thing. One of the things that an awful lot of Australian plants have is something called water stress. That's actually not because they've got too little water, but because they're adapted for not a lot of water. You give them too much and you'll kill them. Okay, so you have to maintain an optimal range. That's what regulation is for. Now, one of the ways that we actually help regulate, one of the main ways is the stomata, because it allows CO2 in, but it also lets out your water. So it can be both a blessing and a curse. Now, this is how stomata work. They have these little vacuoles in there. Okay, vacuoles are where we store water. In all of our plant cells and all other little things as well. Now, when there's lots and lots of water, those vacuoles are really full of water. They're very hard, they're very what we call turgid, and therefore the shape of the cell holds. And if it's holding tight, when they're really full of water, they actually spread out, and there's this great big gap here, okay, which is essentially the hole or the stomata that allows the gas in and out. However, when you have less water, what happens is this. Those little guys here, I'm just going to rub that out. Oops. Those little guys here, they actually go all flaccid. And when those little vacuoles go flaccid, the shape of the guard cell goes from really round to sort of really flat, because it's got a flaccid vacuole in there. Two flaccid guard cells, two flaccid vacuoles means that the gap actually closes up, and because of that you end up having no hole there. That's how they work. Lots of water, turgid vacuoles, holds its shape nice and wide, less water, less flaccid vacuoles, and it actually collapses in. And that's how they regulate gases going in and out of the leaf. Now, another thing that they regulate is how much light gets into the leaf, because light affects heat. Okay? You want to have light for photosynthesis, sure, but if you have too much, you're actually going to overheat the leaf and kill it. And if you have too little, well, you're not going to have enough photosynthesis occurring for the leaf, for the plant to survive. Okay, but the biggest thing is actually overheating. So when you look at your leaf, okay, on both sides, but mainly on the top side, you actually have this coating called a cuticle. And we had a look at that before. I'm just going to roll up to that just a moment. There it is there, that very thin layer there on this one. That thin layer, which is actually a wax coating. And wax, as you know, is waterproof, so it doesn't allow water to get out through all of these cracks here. Water can't get out unless it's through the stomata. But it also is quite shiny and reflects light. That's what a waxy coating does. So on leaves where they really need to protect themselves against the temperature, if you look at these leaves, they have a really thick cuticle on top of them, and it's often shiny as well, so that the light rays just bounce right back off it, and only a few rays actually make it through and into the cell so that they can help with photosynthesis. Basically, you want to control that very, very carefully. Now, another way that you can help is if it does absorb too much light and it gets too hot, well, heat can be lost again through transpiration. Now, transpiration is essentially where you have your tree or your plant, you have your xylem, which are the circulatory system, the plant that carries water up the tree, and they eventually go all the way out to the leaf of that tree. Okay, they're the vessels that run through those leaves, and they take the water up there. Now, that water is in liquid form as it goes up the tree. However, when it gets up to the top there, if there's lots and lots of light heating up that leaf, the very first thing is that the liquid water is going to then start to evaporate. In other words, it's going to convert and change into a gas, and it does that by absorbing some of the heat. Now, when it absorbs that heat, that essentially cools the plant down. It's like sweating. Okay, it cools the plant down, and then as long as you have a gap where that hot gas can escape, so yes, the stomata do open in this case, that hot water gas can actually leave the leaf and take the heat with it. Essentially, transpiration can help the plant through evaporative heat loss.